It's so nice to meet you, Jess. I'm Andrea Pilar, she, her pronouns. I'll let you introduce yourself for the folks that are here joining us today.
Yeah, Jess Smith, she, her as well, and looking forward to being here. I oversee revenue with Angel City. Right now, what that means is sponsorship, ticketing. I am also overseeing operations and data and analytics. So just a few things. And I've been with the club for unofficially close to 3 years, just advising because I was a fan of what they were building. And then officially here close to 2.
Amazing. I'll put aside our beef for 20 minutes or whatever.
Well, wait to see what we have planned for that runway. I can just tell you we're working hard.
Please, good luck. Anyway, I am the digital marketing person, everything at Gotham FC, and I'm so excited to join you today and kind of lead this conversation because I'm fascinated to hear what you have to say. So basically, this is, inclusive investment, how it's impacting the industry's inclusion at large. And I think we have 2 main ideas that we're going for. How are we fostering inclusion through investment strategies, and how are we building an investment strategy that positively impacts inclusion in the industry? So I think like a first question that's kind of on my mind is like, how can investment models that are community-based begin to improve the equity of the industry at large? And I know that's kind of a loaded question. There's a lot to it, but
it's like, how long do we have on this panel? Yeah, I think there's so many different layers to it, right? And specific to women's sports, we have to tackle it based on every segment of what's been the systemic issues holding us back from the growth and equity that we know is there and should be achieved, right? So certainly when you speak of investment models, like that starts with ownership, right? So you think, how we came about and like we thought about ownership, we really approached it like you would a startup. And a lot of the strengths that you see, in that moment is that you get a collective audience with a variety of skill sets coming together under a shared value to build something that's incredibly strong, right? Because you can go to the experts in their fields and ask them how to do this thing, right? So we have everybody from tech venture to A-list folks, which obviously we're in Los Angeles. That's important, when it comes to influence, to the most prominent athletes across the globe, not just in soccer with 14 former U.S. women's national team members, but people like Billie Jean King, who I think all of us, are just in awe by. We can call her and ask, hey, we're thinking about building our business this way. Can you help us understand what your perspective is there? So from an ownership perspective, the collective there, I think, and you're starting to see that adopted, not just in women's sports, but in sports in totality, of bringing those communities together in a really cool way is something I don't think is going away anytime soon. Then you think through investment when it comes to the club itself, right? So how are you building your revenue streams? Because for you to be successful, you have to have sponsors, you have to sell tickets, right? So often, I think the perception of women's sports having to be grateful, like, thank you so much for buying a ticket. Thank you so much for watching something on TV. When the product is like, unbelievable, as all of us know, right? But how do we make sure that we're building investment models that prove its worth to that and also hold their own, right? Like in what it is worth, right? And making sure that we understand why it is worth something and taking the time to do the valuations, understand the marketplace, all of those things. And for us, as we built those, I don't know how far into this we want to go right now, but it was important for us that every investment piece went back into what the brand is of who we are, right? So we built a club on equity, right? Like, we exist. We're going to talk about it. We're not going to say, oh, we're just going to be the most, badass club in the world. We are, like, no offense. That's our goal, but we exist and we're birthed out of the Time's Up movement to bring light and attention to how to build a more equitable future, obviously through the lens of Angel City and the influence that we have. So I think investment is, like, we could talk about this at all the different layers. And then obviously the league perspective too, right? Broadcast partners, media partners, influencers, how is all of that being invested in at different levels to make sure that we're producing this great product that then we can go get resource from? When all of those things start to increase, the resource and the money increases. And what does that do? That allows us to pay the players more money and allows them to leverage themselves and their personal likeness more so. So the ecosystem of dollars, involves all of those pieces increasing to get there.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers. And I think what you guys are doing so well is proving the value right off the bat. I mean, you've barely played any games, and there's clearly quite a bit of value in Angel City. So I'm really curious, how, do you think that investing in institutions started by historically marginalized people, like the way MLS has partnered with the National Black Bank Foundation, will positively influence the inclusion of those individuals currently working or like people aspiring to work in the industry? Because, what we find is there's how like the struggle that I'm working with a lot too, because I'm like the DEI representative for my club, and for instance, is like, okay, so what's the strategy? Do we just hire a bunch of people at the top? They don't have the experience? How do we bring in people to make sure that marginalized communities are getting opportunities?
Yeah.
And so I'm just really curious about this.
Yeah, I mean, our perspective is that it's hard to know where to jump in, right? Because it's recognizing that it's not good right now when it comes to on-field and off-field opportunities, to making sure you have diverse opportunities, not only for women, but women of color and Black women, et cetera. So like, how are we just recognizing and being honest with the fact that it's not good, right? Then it's digging into, well, the whys behind that. What is the research we can do to really understand why that's happening? Is it, more likely in certain areas of the country, cities versus not? Like, what are the different pieces that are some of the control factors that maybe we can provide resource to begin to make actual change? And the third is making actual change and commitment, again, with dollars, right? We really do think that talking about the issues that are at large are really important. And obviously there's an education platform and the influence that all of us have, but doing that without actual systemic change and resource towards things feels a bit usurious as well, right? So you can't just point out and be like, we should pay our players more money. Well, what does that mean? How am I, a consumer, able to help you do that? How am I as a brand able to help you do that, right? So I think that that piece of it all, is really important. So like for us, like what we're doing is part of our sponsorship model with the 10% piece. Specifically, we're working with a couple of partners that are really passionate about this, specifically, whether it comes to coaching pipelines or access into sports and fashion. I don't know how old I am by saying this, but like, I had to come through sports with an unpaid internship. I can tell you, from a single parent household, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I literally had to live off food coupons to try to figure out like how to make it in sports. That's unacceptable. And the only reason I had the opportunity to have an unpaid internship is because I was a college student, right? So like, let's just recognize the privilege that goes along with like access, like in that one instance, right? And then the on-field piece, like it's just throughout. So how do we start to break down those barriers of access and information to actually give experience that will ultimately help us create a more equitable line of talent, both on and off the field, right? So with Birdies, for instance, what we're doing is we're providing internship programs to diverse young women in high school so they can get access into sport and fashion, with real experience and et cetera, and a company resource. And because we view college as a barrier, even like as a first step there. So with both of our industries, that's really important for us. On the field too, there's an issue with female coaching pipelines, right? It's been like, all of us can recognize that, but why is that? Are we providing female athletes, as well as other females that don't want to be athletes, but are, savvy around sports, the opportunity to get the skill sets they need to then be, just as versed and educated in areas that make them the best coaches in the world? And the answer is no, right? So like, where do we jump in there? So with Gatorade, we're jumping in and funding some programming to making sure that athletes have the opportunity to go get those certificates and can be funded to do so in real time. So those are just two small examples, but I think case studies as to pinpointing part of the problem and giving real resource into changing individual lives and hoping that that is part of what will happen to like also talking about and recognizing it at the high end. To your point, like experience, like you do need that, in real time, and unfortunately the diversity. Oh, thank you, Apple Watch. I'm not sponsored by them, by the way. I should definitely charge for that drop. How do we recognize that though in real time and really make sure that we're aware of bias, et cetera?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's really interesting when you started to talk about coaching, my mind sort of went to a lot of things in women's soccer or women's sports in general feel like a chicken or the egg situation, because I'm like, I don't know where the problem started.
Yeah.
And there's so many different like ways that we need to fix them. And I know that seems, I'm just like, it's a little overwhelming to work with because we don't have a huge pool of women coach talent or marginalized community folks talent in the coaching community in the United States. And is it because there isn't really like a huge pipeline for their success? Like there really isn't a job waiting for them that's going to pay them enough in the professional women's soccer world there's only 12 teams, and, we've lost coaches in the past in the NWSL to colleges because colleges are well funded. And so that's like, it's all kind of, I can see college as a barrier, and all those things you were talking about really resonated with me as well. You brought up birdies, and it feels like ACFC broke the mold with community ownership model. But you do have conscious investors like birdies. Where does that conversation start with looking at investment goals, investment impact on the club's P&L sheet, player acquisition, retention, board member goals? Like, what's really like the chief goal there?
Sorry, that was a lot of questions. So
I know, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, the chief goal when it comes to like, how are we like ultimately tying our revenue and impact together for the greater good? And like, what does that look like? For us, it's, one thing in being full of impact and full of profit. Like, we expect to be profitable. Actually, most sports organizations around the world are not. It's important to us to marry purpose and profitability, right? We don't view those as mutually exclusive. In fact, we view being profitable as one of the things that will help change and move forward the investment within women's sports around the globe. And you're already starting to see that, right? People looking at it not only because it's the right thing to do and invest, but looking at it because it actually is an incredible investment. And the reason, like, you just think about it from like a really basic standpoint, you have the most powerful athletes in the U.S. women's national team in the world, in many segments, like, and then you don't have an area of a pipeline for them to actually like play consistently, hone in on fan bases, build their likeness. So if you're just looking at both of those pieces to the puzzle, it seems as though one of those needs to match the other, right? So for us, the purpose and profitability piece is top of mind. And then to dig one step under that, and this comes from everything from the board to our front office, like everything we do, we are thinking about, we have 3 club pillars. So we're thinking about those 3 pillars in every decision that we make. The first is equity. Like, is this helping us? Is this driving towards our ultimate goal? Certainly pay equity being the priority there. But as we've talked about, making sure that we're supporting the LGBTQ community, the Black community, people of color, those with disabilities, et cetera. The second is essentials. Are we really thinking through how this essentially feeds into our community and how we're supporting them, whether it's the tactical things like providing safe places to play, equipment for youth. Unfortunately, one of the main reasons young women stop playing sports that we found out is they don't have access to a sports bra. How are we making sure we're not ignoring that we're not ignoring that not our entire community is fed or housed, right? Like, are we thinking about those things as we're also trying to win championships on the field? And the third is education, like using platforms and participating in things like this as often as we can, right? To just learn and also have honest conversations of people of influence, which is everyone, right? To understand these things and hopefully utilize that in their everyday lives. So what's happened is, because we are value driven like that, it has also led to the profitability. When we're walking into the room with a potential investor, when we're walking into the room with a potential sponsor, when we're working to sell season tickets, they want to be part of the solution, right? It's from a tactical standpoint, it's both the COVID consumers and Gen Z are now more than ever, where am I spending my money? How am I spending my money? What am I watching? Who am I following? Why am I doing that? And what does it mean? People now understand the power of themselves, I think, unlike any other time in history, given what all of us have just collectively gone through. So you take a look at a brand like Angel City, it's a little bit of like the exact right time as well, that people are looking for something like that. And we've been able to walk in and say, this is who we are. Would you like to do this with us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles, and I was really blown away by the sports bra with Nike partnership and the like season ticket partnership. I just thought that was like a perfect example of, kind of putting your money where your mouth is. And it's not just symbolic or like presentational. You really were making a difference, because I also needed a sports bra very young, and it felt very personal. Like, it was a great touch. And I think more, teams should be doing activations like that. That does physically could change someone's life. I have another question. Are there future goals for Angel City to invest / support players and their personal organizations? For example, we're big fans of Jasmine Spencer's Jazz It Up Eco line, those kinds of things.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we view our job as to make sure that we're talking to, and I just want one quick acknowledgement. I grew up in New York. I work for LA. You grew up in LA. You work for New York. So I just want to like throw that out there. What's exciting here.
I love that for us.
For us, it's about providing as much resource and education in the locker room and for our players as possible, right? So first and foremost, like at a really basic level, in all of our partnerships, we build in multiple paid appearances for them to participate. We view all of those opportunities as ones that are their strongest when everybody's participating and has an opportunity to use their likeness. When it comes to players' personal businesses, they definitely are a separate entity, right? But how do we encourage whatever our players want to do and provide resource into that, through anything from ownership to trainings to coachings, et cetera. So for us, there's no difference in somebody that's directly out of college as a draft pick and the Jazz and the Kristen Presses in our locker room. Like, we're grateful to have all of them. They're unbelievable. But how are we working for everybody to understand and utilize their personal likeness? How are we providing things like financial literacy programming, making sure investments, are going the right way? Our league hasn't necessarily had the access to things like that in the past, and we don't want to ignore that, right? And how are we making sure that we're explaining all of this to them, and representing like the business side of them as people too? And I think one piece that you can't ignore is also, how are we telling their stories through our platforms, right? So how are we shining that and like letting people know like they are our organization? So 100% you'll see a lot of off-field content. We've invested heavily in our content team. They're wonderful. I know you understand that more than most. It's a lot, right? These beautiful videos that you see, or quick 30-second hits, or reels that are getting posted, are more complicated and difficult to pull off, I think, than the consumer realizes. But there's such an important piece to storytelling that allows them to hopefully increase their likeness in any segmented market, to do things like be an entrepreneur if that's what they would like to do. But at the same time, if they'd like to be a coach, we want to support them in that way as well. So it's really just about understanding who they are, what they need, and then how we can support them.
Yeah, 100%. I feel like from a content standpoint in general with our players, it's all about like lifting them up, giving them a platform, and then, showing what makes them special off the field and on the field, so that when they do have their own personal ventures, like people are already aware of their talents or their interests. And that is like the easiest way for a club to kind of promote without having to like get involved. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to open this up to questions. I mean, you have been extremely informative. And if I was at all in charge of revenue, this would be extremely helpful to me. But I'm sure people got a lot from it. And I certainly did, because there's nothing that I love more than talking about equity and valuing these players, because that's like what I've dedicated my entire career to as well. So thank you so much for joining me. I mean, I think if anyone has any questions, throw them in the chat for us, and Jess will give you, I mean, literally an amazing answer.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in while people may be doing that. I think an important piece to keep our eye on as our league continues to grow is this broadcast space, right? So I have joke about it, but we have our CBS deal, which is lovely, right? And the opportunity to make sure that we are on as many different screens as possible between them and the Twitch agreement is great, hopefully with local broadcast opportunities as well. Before that, we had a lifetime deal, right? Where, of course, murder mysteries and women's soccer.
Oh my God. People would go to the bar and be like, can you put Lifetime on? It's like,
I know. Best intentions on all fronts, but like the perception, right? Of like, I just can't get my mom out of my brain, like being like, wait, I don't understand. I'm like, it's okay. I'll explain it first. I think a really big piece for this league and the women's game moving forward is going to be the continued visibility and profitability in the broadcast space. So, I just wanted to put that out in the universe. It's not solely on anybody's plate, but it's just one of those large collective pieces that could be really transformative for everybody.
Yeah, I agree. I think, as much as we can talk about, our broadcast deal has improved markedly. I remember watching like an NWSL final on YouTube, but now we're seeing the impact that European women's soccer is having, the numbers that we're producing, that I saw that the Wave versus Angel City produced, and it was almost as much as the Challenge Cup final last year, but it's okay. You'll get there. But yes, there's a massive opportunity.
1 million viewers for a preseason tournament game, right?
Yeah,
like, is that with 2 brand new teams, right? So if that doesn't tell you what the opportunity is at hand, I mean, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And you could throw some stats in there about, some men's teams are not pulling those numbers. So Just saying.
I
We
know.
have a couple questions in the chat, and while we're kind of getting to those, Rachel did message me if you wanted to show a video and you had a link, you can send her. She can queue that up for us as well.
Awesome.
So I'll start going through these. So could you speak to your thoughts on the monetization of the game day experience by Leah Godfrey? Hopefully I said that right.
Oh, Leah, man, this has been my life for a long time. And because I oversee operations as well. So one of the pieces of women's sports is we rarely own our venue. So I just want to put that out there. That is something and I've worked in men's sports my whole career previous to this position, for a lot of the reasons we talked about earlier, and just making sure I could make a comparable salary and like those types of pieces. But so you have to go into a venue that you don't own, right? And you have to kind of understand how you would monetize that with like a whole different lens. Number one, access to it. So when do you get access to it? You have to wait your place in line based on if they've already booked concerts, certainly if you're sharing a venue with a men's team of any sort, what that looks like. Then after that, you have to have the conversation around, okay, what does getting access cost? So you're already looking at just a base level of just rental agreements. You're looking at a baseline of cleaning fees, field wear and tear, locker room access, security, like the lines of just the basic, like opening the doors of venues is just something that's significant. I think is the best way to say it. Then right after that, you have to marry that with, okay, like the two main ways to monetize, well, there's three main ways I should say to monetize game day: ticket sales, merchandise sales, and sponsorship. And the only reason concessions and parking I wouldn't say is on there is because the first reason is that we don't own the venue. So these agreements are much different, like across the board on what you get access to, and if you do or you are able to make money off of those two pieces, or what percentage you are. But it's much less obviously if you don't own the venue itself. It's part of the perks of owning the venue and taking on all the pieces to that puzzle. So for us, season tickets was the top priority for us for a variety of reasons, and we had, a nice pathway, and timeline to build that up. So I'm proud to say we're close to 15,500 season tickets in that venue, which holds just under 22,000. Those are numbers that compare and beat numerous men's teams in Los Angeles, which we're excited to say that for. And we're confident that is right now the highest number in the NWSL. We hope that somebody comes for us quick, because that's the fun of it. On the merchandise side, for us, we've sold merchandise in 38 countries in all 50 states. And now we're getting ready to have a whole new piece of merchandise with like the on-site, right? Like the jersey sales, the customization opportunities. Supply chain's a real thing right now. I know
it sure is.
So this is like, it's one of the main data points around investing in women's sports is that merchandise is actually sold at a higher rate. But one of the issues is there hasn't been enough product that people actually want to buy, or the types of product that people want to buy. So being really conscious of that, thinking about our fans, constantly having new drops and opportunities because the market has shown that it is there and ripe there. And then certainly sponsorship, right? So sponsorship, given the number of games for NWSL, is definitely game related, but you do a lot more off the field as well when it comes to these opportunities with the 365 feel. But on the game day, what does a title night feel like for DoorDash, who's the inaugural night partner for us, right? How are fans going to walk in, know it's their night? And for us, how are they going to know about the impact that we do? I referenced earlier, but 10% of each of our corporate partnerships go directly back into the equity, essentials, and education pillars that we have. So with DoorDash, we're going to feed over 1 million people over the course of our partnership. When halftime rolls around, while it would be lovely to like see dogs on the field chasing Frisbees, they're really cool. I love them. For us, it's more about reinforcing like, what is the work that we're doing? And also, how are we sharing with people, the percentages of those that are food insecure in our community, and like what you may be able to do to help us do that. Then of course, there'll be some fun mix in there as well. Sure. So those are our main pieces around monetizing game day. It's a lot of work and there are a lot of expenses. So monetizing game day is really difficult. There's just a lot of fees associated on all the things, but that is a really good question. It's literally where I spend my brain power over the last 6 months and bringing all of that together, which we finally get to show everybody next Friday.
Yes, they're your first home game. It's
very
exciting. I'm excited for you guys because Cal State Fullerton, I feel like you guys are going to bring more of a vibe than I love it there, but it's nice. No, it's going to be fantastic. And I think when I started at this job, I didn't also realize like how complicated it is to rent a stadium, like to be just kind of like a, not a guest in a home.
Mhm.
And, if we have special guests and the costs associated with boxes and suites and money and security and just the
Yeah.
parking, like just things that we just didn't consider, or I never considered as the layman's
And on
person.
a large scale, those venues have sponsors, right? So
Yeah.
one of the benefits of owning a building is you can go out and get a soda and water partner, because you can also say like, you're going to have sales associated with this venue. It's more difficult now for us who are renting a venue to get any competing deal. The deals of like the incumbents don't necessarily have to do deals with us, right? So it has to be a whole
Yeah.
different movement. So there's this other pocket of money, from the sponsorship pipeline, which we want to get really in the weeds, to be cognizant of, because brands, rightfully so, are concerned with competitors in the same space. And it's something that we don't have control over when you don't own the venue.
And there's I don't think Monster is gonna invest in us. We play at Red
Right.
Bull, it's just one of those things that there's nothing you can really do about it. So yeah, it's something that people don't necessarily think about. But one more question in here. Are players ever consulted on the brand/deals a club invests in to promote the team?
That's a great question. So for us, we didn't have a team when we sold most of our partnerships. So for us, it was a little bit different. What I'd say for us is usually as you're attacking, okay, I'm going to go out and find our partners. You've got your traditional categories, which across the globe are the most profitable. You've got finance and auto and insurance, right? And vice and all the other ones that come into those. And usually go back and you're like, okay, I'm going to find our finance partner. How am I going to find? Number one, that's changing a little bit, right? There's been so many disruptions in all of the traditional category spaces to just be aware of, including, crypto deals, which both of us, have activating in really cool ways. It's part of opening night. So stay tuned for what we're doing with crypto.com. It's really cool. But overall for us, because we are values-based, we have to be really cognizant of those conversations. So we really call partners of ours allies in a lot of ways, where they see what we're doing. A partnership with Angel City, and candidly a partnership mostly in women's sports and with different teams, it means something. And that's the biggest value, in making sure that we're representing ourselves the right way and also charging enough money to invest in what we're building. Because do we have the number of impressions that the Lakers do? I mean, we might. We're probably going to get there. I'm just going to say, yeah, we're going to go for it. But
love that. Yeah.
But is the empathy that fans and consumers feeling towards a brand that knows and invested in women's sports measurable yet? Not necessarily, right? So knowing the consumer conversation that we had earlier, if somebody views DoorDash now, they know that they believe in Angel City. They know that they actually support the NBA, WNBA. They know that they support Bubba Wallace. So they're a great example of they're making purchases throughout the industry that showcase their core values, right? So I think, that's a really great question. So players are always an important part of everything that we do. They're also really busy, but we hope that they trust what we're building and how we're building it. And then of course, we ever ask them to participate in anything and paid appearances, they are always open to say no thank you. And they're also always open to go get competing deals. Like they are their own individual, right? So without our marks and logos, they can leverage their own social media accounts however they see fit.
Yeah, it's so funny. We have to deal with that as a league being a Nike partner, but we have so many Adidas athletes. And it's from my perspective, how do I uplift these Adidas athletes, get them secure that bag, but also be like, don't post Adidas and Puma too much or we're going to get in trouble. But we find a way to make it work 100%. I have another question from Ishika. I hope I said that right.
Yeah, Ithaca. Oh, sorry. I thought you said Ithaca, New York. I was like, yes, upstate New York.
Is that where you're from?
I'm from Auburn, which is right outside of
I went to Syracuse. That's
funny.
My
gosh, this is
so
insane.
Orange.
Okay, yeah, Jim Boeheim.
Oh, Pompeii, New York in the house. Tabitha. There you go. I left LA to go to Syracuse. It was a choice. Choices were made. But then I moved to New York City. It's a lot better. Okay, so Ishika said, what kind of impact does a team's performance have on acquiring partners? That's actually
I mean, that's like an industry question of winning wins, right? So if you look across any data points, when a team is playing well, the beer tastes better.
Yes, it does. I've been there.
Things they're not complaining about certain fees of things that might be people are just generally and genuinely in a better mood, and also accepting of any types of increases or hindrance that are just facing the market at that time. So 100% there is a case study to profitability and putting a winning product on the field if you're concerned with that piece. I would say certainly in the acquisition of new partners, Again, for us, we don't know yet because we haven't played when we acquired all of our partners. But what we built, and why we built it is that usually when you're walking into a room in sponsorship, you're saying, look how great we are. Here are our trophies and this and that and the impressions that we have. And you should sponsor us because you want the affiliation with us. We flipped that on its head and said, we exist. Like the first thing we talk about is like, we exist for a more equitable future. Here's our investment group that has our back. Here's how we're going to do that and like what your resource would mean to the club. And then of course, here are the other assets that you're going to get with us. Do you want to do that with us? So I think what will be really interesting is to ask me that question in 3 to 5 years as our partnerships are up for renewal, because it will be a renewal process unlike any other. We're going to be walking into these rooms and not only talking through the media that was achieved, the impressions that were had, but we're going to be able to showcase the stories of the incredible young women that have received the internship opportunities, through Angel City and Birdies. We're going to be able to sit there and talk to Sprouts Farmers Market about all of the community gardens that we built in elementary schools and what that did to not only supply food, but educate nutritional education, within those school systems by having fresh fruits and vegetables that maybe youth would never have access to or see or understand how to utilize, et cetera. So it's just such a different reason to partner. I hope that we have both. I hope that we get to walk in and say, look at all the winning that we're doing on the field, and also look at all the impact that we're having together. Would we like to keep doing that?
Yeah, I think a mix of both sounds good. But I think also like you guys have managed to pick up a huge amount of partners on this idea and that is driving the team forward. And I do think ultimately that matters just like a little bit more. We care about results. This is a soccer team, but I think for partners to get involved with the community and to get, that is just like slightly supersedes it in my opinion. We have one last question before we wrap. We're running a little behind because there's just so much to talk about. How do you balance incorporating experiences from men's sports with building and reimagining systems in the women's game?
Oh man, I can spend so much time here. Well, I think there's such misconceptions, right, on who the female athlete and female team fan and watcher is. It must be a mom with a minivan with 4 children, right? And like, believe me, we want all the moms in minivans and 4 kids, like get in our house. Like, let's do this, recognize you, all the things that totally exists. But it's also so many different men and women that don't have kids at all, that believe in and watch and consume what we have. And it's not just familial, right? So I think first and foremost, it's breaking down the misconceptions with a lot of people that work in the industry without actual data points too, of just what they think they should be doing to cater to an audience that may not be factual, right? So I think first and foremost, like you always have to just understand who you're talking to, right? And that's going to be different. And you know this, Andrea, like everywhere, Andrea, I'm so sorry. Everywhere that
she did it. I just couldn't believe it.
We just talked about this. Like, man,
it's okay.
Everywhere that like Facebook's gonna be different than Instagram. That's gonna be different from Twitter. That's gonna be different from our hyper localized LA fan base coming to our games, which is gonna be different than our audience buying merchandise in Australia, right? So understand and spend the money to know who those people are, and then get to know like what triggers them to invest in you, watch your videos, engage with you, and then build out products from there, right? So instead of just replicating things to replicate them, figure out who your audience is and then build products for them. Of course, there's some super basic things like it is a soccer match, right? So I think, it's the 90 minutes, it's a 15-minute half. Like the beauty of why soccer is having its moment and will continue to become and be the most powerful sport in the United States is that that's how people want to view sports, right? So how do you build around that from an experience standpoint, making sure that you're building off of the history of the sport and on the shoulders of the greats that have built it in our country, specifically women's soccer, but also catering to that fan, and making that something special. So I think it's a mix of the traditional opportunities with rituals and supporters, et cetera, but certainly not overthinking that who your audience is without the data points.
Yeah, I mean, way to wrap things up. I think, understanding that women's soccer fans are not the fans of 1999, that we've evolved, that we actually grew up. Like we were the kids that came with our families, and now we're grown millennials, and we and younger and older, and we want to go enjoy it the same way anybody enjoys a sport. And of course, families need to come and introduce the next generation and the next generation on, but like there's a huge market outside of, oh, this is family fun for the moms and so, like it's this. I'm really excited that I feel like Angel City came on the scene. A bunch of other clubs are doing the same, and understanding, the market is changing and that there's more. There's
It's
more
all
to
of
it.
us. Like I've been in the room with most of our investors. The one I'm most nervous around is Mia Hamm, rightfully so. Like we're those kids. It's like it's Mia Hamm. Somebody's like, oh my gosh, it's Natalie Portman. I'm like, I'm right, but it's Mia Hamm. Like, do you
Sure.
understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Important.
So
I agree. I mean, I love Natalie. She's great. She's gonna be great in Thor. But yeah, thank you. Rachel's popping in to tell me I'm way over time. Story of my life. But thank you so much, Jess. This was lovely.
Yeah. So nice to meet you.